bring in Toni Sacconaghi of Sanford Bernstein. Michael McKee and I here. Toni, great to have you here. Appreciate the effort to get here. Apple, just remarkable. It was the iPhone. Can the iPhone sustain into 2012?
I think iPhone has very strong momentum, in large part because the underlying market for smartphones is growing at an incredible rate. It grew at over 70% last year. We believe it'll probably grow at 40% or more. Now, whether Apple can continue to grow at 100% or not, I think is doubtful. What Apple needs to do is add more carriers, like it did with Verizon this quarter, and potentially it needs to come out with a lower-priced phone. But the secular dynamics of the underlying marketplace are excellent.
Michael, I want you to come in here with a question. Look at this chart. It's an elegant chart, and it's Apple versus RIM going back to roughly 2006. I picked that arbitrarily. What a remarkable separation between those two companies.
Well, we've seen tremendous interest in the iPhone, whereas the RIM BlackBerry has been utilitarian, and they haven't caught the zeitgeist. They haven't caught the imagination of people.
Toni, when is RIM going out of business?
I think it'll take a while, again, because the underlying dynamics are okay. But, as you noted, there's been tremendous turbulence in this marketplace because you've had Apple as an attacker, and you've also had Google with its Android operating system and all of its partners as an attacker, and the victims are the incumbents, and that's Nokia and RIM. And we think that Apple and its iOS platform and Android are going to be the dominant platforms going forward. They have about 45% market share of the smartphone market, so there's lots more share for them to grab, and it's going to come at the expense largely of those two other players, in our opinion.
Toni, I'm death on the phrase innovation, and you nail it with the idea of product life cycle. People underestimate the power of the product and the power of that life cycle versus various iterations of technological improvement, don't they?
Absolutely. I mean, really what Apple did was change the rules of the game. It said that the phone is now a computer in your pocket, and it built an ecosystem around it, which included an operating system, and then got a set of developers to write applications for it. So it really innovated and changed the game, and the kind of old paradigm of what a phone and what a smartphone was completely upended.
Break exclusive. Toni gets the word paradigm and innovation into the same sentence. Michael, ask a question.
I've got a quick question, though. How much will this revelation that Apple is collecting information on people's whereabouts in their phones going to hurt them, because they have such a great reputation? People are going to say, well, I can get the same features over on an Android phone?
Yeah, I mean, again, Apple has the technical capability to do this. They're not actually capturing and using this data. So, again, I think Apple's been pretty responsive when there have been issues around either competitiveness or consumer pushback, whether it be the antenna issue historically, whether it be around DRM, which is protection for music. Apple's been pretty responsive to that. Mm-hmm. So I think the important message is that Apple is not using this data today. And ultimately, if this is something that consumers are uncomfortable with, I think Apple is generally been pretty open-minded.
All right. Toni Sacconaghi with us from Sanford Bernstein. Toni, you look at Apple, and what I noticed is the margin expansion. Everybody goes, iPad this, iPhone that. This is a chiseled financial machine, isn't it?
Absolutely. They've done a terrific job in expanding their gross margins over time as they've come out with higher margin products. The iPhone is a very high margin product. We think gross margins are about 55%. But they've also been growing so strongly, the top line. So when you're growing the top line at 70 or 80%, you get a lot of fixed cost or operating leverage in your business model. So the combination of both has really been a winning formula for Apple.
I want Michael to jump in, but quickly, what's it cost to make an iPhone? Like $12?
An iPhone sells at retail for about $600, and we think it costs somewhere between $250 and $275 to make.
Do we think that it's going to be affected by the supply chain interruptions we're seeing from Japan?
No, Apple was, and I think this was an important relief for investors last night on the earnings call, is that Apple was pretty explicit in saying that they didn't anticipate any disruption in their ability to secure parts for the the iPhone. And more importantly, they didn't expect any incremental pricing pressure. That's been a theme we've heard from several other companies, including EMC, which is a big storage company. IBM also played down the impact of Japan. And I think, broadly speaking, for technology, that's an encouraging theme and mitigates a worry that many investors had been worried about.
Is this just an iPhone company now? I mean, they started off as a computer company. The Mac's going to fade in importance as the iPhone just eats up more and more and more of their revenue, or creates more and more of it, not eating it up.
Yes, it's true. It's becoming a different company. Mac still grew 28% year over year when the PC market was down this quarter, so that product has great momentum. But you're seeing explosive growth on the iPad and on the iPhone. And really what Apple is now is it's a mobile computing company. What iPads and iPhones are portable computers, and they provide internet access, they provide email, they provide other kinds of functionality, and that is what Apple is. It is the provider of those devices.
Note of the day. Let's go right to it. Note of the day, RBC Capital Markets, Micah Bramsky. I love this jargon, Tony. The Q2 beat and the Q3 outlook to show us still underestimated strength of the iPhone, iPad, Mac product cycles ahead, as well as strong management. Sans, that's French, Mike. Sans CEO Jobs. Mr. Cook really was front and center here, wasn't he, in the conference call and all?
Absolutely. And, I think Apple has executed well in Steve Jobs' absence before, and they continue to do so. A lot of investors are worried about what might happen to Apple if Steve Jobs leaves, and I think that's a very legitimate longer-term question. In the near term, they're great at operations. Even with this Japan disruption, they're really ticking along very nicely. And their products, we believe, are largely baked for the next, 1 to 3 years. And
but that's a question. I mean, they can operate well, but can they innovate without Steve Jobs?
I think longer term, that is a very legitimate question. He is a visionary.
Do we have a graphic? Mike is right. Where is that? Go ahead. Continue, Tony. Continue.
Absolutely. I think that's a legitimate longer-term question. In the meanwhile, though, you're paying a very inexpensive price, we believe, for a preeminent growth company.
Tony, seriously, what is the game theory here of their competitors? They see this quarter, everybody's got iPad on the brain, they do it with the iPhone, you write, Abramsky writes, all the others. How does Android, how do RIM, what are they doing in their offices this afternoon?
Look, I think this is a first-mover advantage game, and Apple proved that with iPod. They were first to the game. They built an ecosystem around it, and it was extremely difficult to catch up. Many big players like Microsoft and Amazon and Walmart tried to play in the portable music game, and ultimately it had no impact on Apple. The tablet evolution may be similar. I think in the phone space, it's been different. Google, along with its partners, Motorola, HTC, others, has been successful in creating an attractive alternative to Apple because they've had broader distribution of the product. They were at Verizon before Apple was, and because they've had lower prices. And I think that's what you try and do. However, I think the tablet die may be cast, and Apple's in a very, very good position.
Well, to get back to where Tom started, do we end up in the pad area with a business pad that is smaller in terms of sales that RIM might be able to fill, and a consumer pad that Apple dominates?
I think that's less likely. I think what we've seen with the iPhone is that consumers are bringing their product into work and saying, we want to use this. And this trend of employees actually wanting their device to be both a dual professional and consumer device, we think is ongoing. And I think we're going to see that on the tablet side. Apple's design imperative is to design for consumers and let them pull the product into enterprises. And my guess is we're going to continue to see really one model that will be principally directed at consumers.
Tony, help me here. I'm going to bring this up. I did this last night, folks. I'm like all thumbs. Here is Color Splash with a photo on the iPad. They take a color photo, make it black and white, and I put in the color of these roses. These roses are from my team. How cool is that? Thank you, ladies. And anyways, here are these two roses, Tony. Tell me about the apps. Talk about innovation, Michael McKee. I mean, Tony, the app momentum is just remarkable, isn't it?
Well, again, I think that is part of the broader platform play that Apple has a strong advantage in. So Apple on the tablet has 65,000 applications. Android tablets, Honeycomb, which is the latest version, have less than 100. So there's a huge gap there, and that really provides a strong first mover advantage, because once someone wants to buy a tablet where there's lots of app availability, and that's obviously the iPad, and then once you have that device, because you've invested in downloading those apps and paying for some of them,
right,
there's a very high stickiness to that, and that's why the first mover advantage is something that Apple has captured and is going to be very difficult to displace.
Toni, really, really, really wonderful. Thank you so much. Toni Sacconaghi with us from Sanford Bernstein on Apple.